It was the Cold War era, and the Soviet Union was in a race to build the world's most powerful military and economy. One of their weapons of choice was the Tu-104 bomber, a massive aircraft that could carry tons of bombs and missiles. But many people didn't know that the Tu-104 had another use, which was even more dangerous than bombing enemy targets. The Soviet Union used these planes as commercial airliners, transporting civilians and cargo across the vast expanse of their country. As the Cold War raged and tensions between the Soviet Union and the West intensified, the Soviet government decided to get creative with their Tupolev Tu-104 bomber. They thought, hey, why not turn this thing into an airline? So in the late 1950s, the Soviet national airline Aeroflot got to work on transforming the Tu-104 into a passenger and cargo plane. They gave it a swanky new interior and upgraded the cockpit and avionics systems to meet civilian aviation standards. This video will spill the tea on why Aeroflot has the reputation of being the most dangerous airline ever. So don't even think of going anywhere, because we've only just begun. The Tu-104 was a marvel of engineering, capable of flying long distances without refueling, but it was also a ticking time bomb, notorious for crashes and accidents. In the 1950s and 60s, the Tu-104 was involved in countless accidents, with hundreds of people dying. The reasons for the crashes varied, from mechanical failure to pilot errors, but one thing was clear: the Aeroflot airline having Tu-104 crashes was the most dangerous airline ever. But more on that later. Interestingly, even pilots were intimidated by this aircraft. In fact, many pilots openly admitted to feeling uneasy about controlling it. A retired pilot said, "I remember flying the Tu-104 in the 60s, and it was a nightmare. The planes were old and poorly maintained, and the pilots were often inexperienced. We were under a lot of pressure to fly these planes because they were so crucial to the Soviet economy." Avoiding flying Aeroflot planes might have been a valid concern for those pilots, as the airline had been associated with some truly heartbreaking stories that are likely to tug at your heartstrings. It was the height of the Cold War, and tensions between the Soviet Union and the United States were at an all-time high. Amid this tense atmosphere, one flight crew found themselves in a harrowing situation aboard a Tu-104 bomber. The crew had been tasked with transporting a highly classified payload across the Soviet Union. The flight was supposed to be routine, but the Tu-104 was known for its mechanical issues and unpredictable performance. As the plane ascended into the sky, the crew noticed something was wrong. The engines were sputtering and the controls were unresponsive. They tried to radio for help, but their communication equipment had also malfunctioned. The crew worked tirelessly to fix the plane, but they knew they were running out of time. They were over the Siberian wilderness with no clear landing site for miles. The situation was becoming more and more dire by the minute. The crew had no choice but to make an emergency landing, but they had no idea where they would end up. The plane hit the ground with a deafening roar, tearing through the snow and sending debris flying in all directions. The crew was lucky to have survived, but they were stranded in the middle of nowhere with no food, water, or shelter. The crew struggled to survive in the harsh Siberian wilderness for days, fighting against the elements and fear. They knew that they would die in the frozen wasteland if they didn't get rescued soon. Miraculously, the crew was rescued just in time and returned home as heroes. But the incident served as a stark reminder of the dangers of flying aboard the Tu-104 and the risks that Soviet pilots and crew members faced daily. The Tu-104 was a powerful weapon of war, but also a deadly machine, a symbol of the risks and sacrifices made during the Cold War, and a reminder of the fragility of human life in the face of danger. Today, the Tu-104 is a relic of a bygone era, a reminder of the dangers of putting military hardware into civilian use. But for those who lived through the era of the Tu-104, the memories of the crashes and accidents will never fade. Aeroflot, the flag carrier of Russian Federation, has some serious history. It was known for its breathtakingly beautiful flights over vast snow-covered landscapes, but it was also infamous for its its notoriously dangerous reputation. While other airlines worldwide were taking steps to improve safety measures and maintain their fleets, Aeroflot was cutting corners at every opportunity, putting passengers' lives at risk. The airline had a shockingly high accident rate, with crashes and mishaps happening all too frequently. In fact, during the 1970s and 1980s, Aeroflot had one of the worst safety records of any airline in the world. But wait, there's more. Even the pilots were often overworked, undertrained, and underpaid, leading to many incidents and accidents. In addition, the airline's aircraft often needed to be better maintained and updated, with many planes flying well past their recommended lifespan. Aeroflot continued to operate despite these issues, ferrying passengers across the Soviet Union and its satellite countries. And while many people flew with the airline out of necessity or lack of other options, others were drawn by the excitement and adventure of flying with such a notorious carrier. Aeroflot has taken steps to improve its safety record ever since by investing in new aircraft and training programs for its pilots. However, the airline's dangerous legacy is a reminder of the risks and sacrifices made by those who took to the skies in the Soviet era. Despite the dangers, the Soviet Union continued using the Tu-16 as a commercial airline, even as other countries were phasing out their military planes for civilian use. It wasn't until the collapse of the Soviet Union in the 1990s that the Tu-16 was finally retired. Despite this craziness, believe it or not, Aeroflot was once a key player in the world of espionage. During the Cold War, the Soviet government used the airline to transport spies and gather intelligence from around the world. In fact, some of the most famous spies in history, like Rudolf Abel and Francis Gary Powers, were flown by Aeroflot at one time or another. However, after the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991, these activities ceased, and Aeroflot focused on becoming a safer and more modern airline. Today, the airline is known for its wide range of destinations and modern fleet of aircraft. Back in 1957, a spy named Rudolf Abel got caught by the United States. But get this, he wasn't just a spy, he was a master of disguise. He posed as an artist and even hid secret messages in his paintings to communicate with his handlers back in the Soviet Union. Now here's where it gets really interesting. Abel needed a way to travel back and forth between the US and the Soviet Union without getting caught. So how did he do it? By flying on Aeroflot, the Soviet national airline. This airline was super close to the Soviet government and was often used for spying activities. Abel flew on several Aeroflot flights, including his final flight back to Moscow after he was exchanged for another American spy. Crazy, right? It just goes to show how intertwined Aeroflot was with Soviet intelligence operations back in the day. But before we dive deeper into the history of Aeroflot, make sure you hit that subscribe button to stay updated with the latest and greatest in the world of luxury. In the early years, Aeroflot operated various aircraft, including biplanes and other small planes. However, it wasn't until the 1950s and 1960s that the airline began to modernize its fleet by including jet-powered aircraft. During the Soviet era, Aeroflot was a state-owned enterprise and played a key role in the transportation of people and goods across the vast Soviet Union. The airline was also used as a propaganda tool, with its planes often featuring elaborate murals and other decorations celebrating Soviet achievements. In addition to its domestic operations, Aeroflot also operated international flights, connecting the Soviet Union with destinations around the world. However, these flights were often subject to restrictions and limitations imposed by the Soviet authorities. After the fall of the Soviet Union, Aeroflot underwent a period of restructuring and modernization, with the airline transitioning to a more market-driven model. Today, Aeroflot is a major global carrier serving destinations around the world with a modern fleet of aircrafts. Despite its troubled past, Aeroflot remains an important symbol of Russian aviation history and continues to play a key role in the transportation of people and goods across the country and around the world. The civilian version of the Tu-16 was later designed as the Tu-104, which was the first successful jet airliner to enter regular service. The Tu-104 was introduced into Aeroflot's fleet in 1956 and quickly became a popular choice for travelers due to its speed and comfort. Over the next decade, the Tu-104 would be used extensively by Aeroflot on both domestic and international routes. However, the aircraft was eventually phased out of service in the 1970s as newer and more advanced jet airliners became available. That's the story of the most dangerous airliner ever. If you're interested in aviation and want to learn more about planes, click here to watch how airplane engines are tested. You will be blown away to know that even a chicken gun is used in the process. I'll see you there in just a second.